I wanted to start by asking you, how has Indonesia been contending with the COVID-19 pandemic? And what is the situation in the country right now?
First of all, I think Indonesia is going through a very similar, if not the same process like many other countries in the world. So it's always a conflict between the uh, health, managing the health situation and the economy itself. So it's always between the two, flip-flopping what is more important. And because of the democratic means that the leader cannot not listen to the people, and there's a lot of complaints in the country that people will they lose their jobs and lose their livelihoods, and so because of that, the leaders compromise on making the best for the health situation without compromising the economy. In the end, Indonesia is a democratic country, so the leaders are worried about the health situation. They're doing the best they can. At the same time, they try to massage the economy in a way that it doesn't lose everything. So the situation right now is basically that because of that, the numbers of infected people per day has not been decreasing. It has been slowly, almost crouching, going up to a level which is relatively high. Uh, I think more than 4,000 or 4,000-ish infected people per day, or 5,000 in the whole country, that is to say, yeah. So Indonesia being a very large country, not only from a population standpoint of view, but also from a size point of view, you can imagine that there's parts of Indonesia which are very, very left out. I mean, they're very isolated. They're not really in connection with the rest of the Indonesia. There's some cases here and there, but they're like very, very small. The hotspots are the big cities, and the hotspot of the hotspots is where I live is Jakarta. So Jakarta itself is we have to also bring it into correlation. Jakarta as a city is actually a megapolitan. It's a city surrounded by other cities. So we have about almost 30 million people living here. You're talking about managing a country, but basically it's in the context of a big city, and it's very, very difficult. I think the hopes are pinning on the forthcoming vaccines, that will bring a lot of relief to the situation, which I'm not quite sure how fast will it be. I mean, since we have so many people to inject the vaccine into, there's first of all an organizational problem, a logistic problem, and then a money problem. It needs money. I mean, the government has set aside quite large funds. Indonesia has never been so much in the Indonesian government has never been so much in debt as right now. But all of that has gone into either measurements regarding overcoming the health challenges right now related to COVID, or economic stimuli that basically help predominantly the economic weak.
As you bring up, of course, the coronavirus has had, huge impacts on Indonesia, not only from like the individual health and well-being of the residents, but also, as you say, these economic impacts that have brought about even a recession for the first time in several decades in Indonesia. And these really large shocks also come on top of some increasing polarization that can be seen in Indonesian society and politics, with some deep divides emerging, particularly in recent years. From your perspective, how do you think the pandemic will impact these challenges, these societal challenges in Indonesia, and how can the country overcome these divisions and move past these challenges?
I think that the second question is easier. How can we overcome it? And that is something where I think Indonesia is particularly strong, actually, is the sense of togetherness that Indonesians show to one another, no matter what kind of background you're coming from. Indonesia is not a particularly traditionally not a particularly discriminative society when it comes to race, religion, or gender. So that's not typically Indonesian. Yes, you're right. We have seen increasing activities to divide what is there in order to gain politically, particularly from it. Right. So we're talking about the impact of identity politics, and that is something that we see in many places and has not left Indonesia out. And Indonesia happens to be a society which is traditionally deeply religious. So religion is automatically an identity that people basically exploit in order to gain something from it. So whether it's politically or whether it's ideologically or even materialistically, but this trend persists in Indonesia. It has been growing, I think, in Indonesia in the last years. But when it comes to the very basic behavior to something spontaneous, the Indonesians tend to be very generous people to one another. Also, trying to be uh, not only helpful but proactive to help people's challenges, no matter what their economic background is, or no matter what the background. It's not just the economic background. But I think again, for me, I blame more the current global trend of identity politics or identity attitude maybe that is responsible for that rather than the true character of Indonesians itself. So I think we have to just we have to realize our true character and nature of the Indonesian and basically reinforce that rather to be swayed away by something that comes from outside and has actually impacted Indonesia. It has gone particularly sometimes deeply into Indonesia's fabric. And Indonesia is, of course, being such a large country, is very strategically important. I think there has been an article that I've read with great interest talking about Indonesia as one of the decisive so-called democratic swing states in the world. So it is where democracy is being decided. I mean, the future of democracy is in a country like Indonesia. We've gone through some ups and downs as well, but I mean, it took a while until we have established that. But a country like Indonesia is very important for democracy itself. How can democracy itself find a stronger footing in the world? And frankly speaking, between you and me, I think the face of democracy will be very different in the future. And that we've seen in Indonesia and other countries. I mean, there's always the question of division. There's a divide in many societies. There's a sense of being left out in many societies that are democratic. The future democracy needs to be more inclusive, needs to be taken care of, bringing everybody more in the middle. No divide, basically, whether it's economic, education, or health, or political, whatever. It cannot be like that. The future shape of democracy we have not seen yet. Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum is planning to gear the next session about the Great Reset. So that's what we have. But Great Reset means you rethink democracy, you rethink capitalism, you rethink liberalism, you rethink everything in the context of what we've seen right now, which has been sort of exacerbated by the current situation and amplified. But I mean, it's a good opportunity to really go back and see what really works and what doesn't work and how should we do it in the future. And that also is valid for Indonesia.
Right, that actually brings us quite nicely into kind of the next question in this discussion.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I'm looking at democracy that has been a central component of the cooperation between the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and the Habibie Center, including most recently a report published that looked into civil liberties and democratization in Indonesia,
Right.
as well as other countries in ASEAN. How do you see the pandemic impacting these ongoing dialogues about civil liberties and democratization in Indonesia, as well as what are your hopes for continuing to promote democracy in Indonesia, or what do you see as the future of democracy in Indonesia if, as you say, the face of democracy is set to change looking to the future?
I think it's like this. In the end, every individual on this planet, including Indonesians, will always say, oh, "Okay, democracy is fine, but what's in for me? What does it mean for me? Yeah, do I really get something out of it or not? Do I?" I think in Indonesia people feel very empowered because they like. I mean, you see that in the participation in the elections. It's overwhelming. I mean, we have 80%, 90% participation, and nobody's forcing people to go to vote, but they like to participate. Yeah, they see that their vote matters, and I think that shows a certain uh, enthusiasm for democracy in terms of empowering them. On the other side, people also see that, not all, but many people see that they're not moving ahead in their lives. I mean, they are economically, educationally, or health-wise impacted to the degree they say, okay, this so-called democracy is really good for me because I feel that I have some power, but in the end, my life doesn't really change. So I think democracy needs to deliver certain things that people really feel. It starts with the rules and regulation, and then also basically the follow of that is basically implementing and the applying of that and making everything efficient, etc., and transparent and fair and just. And that is, I think, sometimes I think it's more about the democracy as a system in Indonesia is understood, but it's not just fine tuning, but really making institutions work, right? I mean, talk about democracy and economy or politics and economy. The partner of democracy is a market-based economy, right? They're like related to one another. If you have a democracy politically, then the economic system that fits to that is market-based. Market-driven or market-based economy. What does it mean? Does it mean that if I compare to other countries, that you see polarization in the politics and you see polarization in the economy. In the economy, you in a politics, you see the winner takes it all in terms of not really. He takes care about the voters that voted for him or her, and make sure that that has been achieved. But what about the others have not voted for them, right? And are they basically not to be supported in what they need and what they want? I mean, there's all. If you become president, you're the president for the whole country, not just for the people that voted for you. Same in the economy, interestingly. And many sectors of the economy, the winner takes it all. So basically, what has happened here? Innovation. You need participants that gain from growth in the economy are becoming less. They become subcontractors are completely left out of the economy. And I think it is the democratic institution that to be repaired in every country, including Indonesia, that prevent polarization to that degree. You can do this. I mean, the economy is easier. In the States, as in Indonesia, I would say, well, we have to strengthen antitrust. If there's something that's dominating so much, I'm sorry to say, this cannot continue like this. Has to be split up in more than one company. But in democracy, it's also the same thing, right? You have to basically say that it shouldn't be monopolized. There needs to be a healthy competition. There needs to be a choice for people. I think these are the columns, the pillars of democracy. They need to be upheld. They cannot be compromised. In Indonesia, what we have right now, because of democracy, then we have certain cases in particular regencies where they elect a regent. This is basically like below the province, you have regencies, and you have only one candidate because there's nobody else wants to do it because they say it's too expensive, it's too risky, etc., etc. Why is it so? Because they cannot afford it. It's the money question. And again, if it's like this, the democracy is only for the ones that can basically raise the money, and then they have enough in order to risk it and to do something for the people, then it's not the type of democracy we should have. It's about the best that we have, and they need to be supported by a system that really doesn't look at what the economic background is in terms of whether they can afford it or whether they can raise the money, etc. The other question is more difficult. It's actually, you talk the discussion between civil liberties and democracy. So in pandemic, we have another example here, which is not democracy, but it's autocracy. Autocracy has shown us clearly that for situations like this, democracy might be actually weaker. I'm not saying it's bad, but weaker. As I said in the beginning, right now, many governments, they flip-flop between doing the right thing for health and then doing the right thing in the economy, and then the health deteriorates, and then it's just in many democratic countries that I see. In autocratic countries that I see, some of them, they just do the right thing from the beginning. It says, okay, stop everybody. People complain, but they have no say. So they basically do it, and then they really become healthy, and then they go on with life. The challenge is basically, and that is, I think, the ongoing discussion, what's actually the best system to deal with kind of problem? This is also something like a war with a virus, and a war with an enemy that we cannot see. But maybe we need another system here where we don't have, we just decide, maybe it's the togetherness where we have to decide all together, okay, because it's a global thing, right? It's the virus is not something that stays in one place. It just travels around the world because of the globalization. And so I think the world needs to come together and decide together that, okay, this thing we have to treat together, and we do it all together in the same way, and only then we can basically overcome it.
Even looking toward the future, where in a future where we have moved past COVID-19. What
Right.
is your vision for either Indonesia's role specifically, or even more broadly on a regional level, looking to ASEAN? Or what kind of vision for the future of society do you have for the region post COVID-19?
Indonesia is the silent giant in ASEAN. About 41% of ASEAN is Indonesia alone. And the other nine countries is the remainder of 59%. So the future of Indonesia is not determining, but impacting ASEAN's future to a very large degree. Indonesia, because it's so big, is actually more concerned about itself. It's more domestic rather than international. Yeah, it's now slowly but surely waking up in order to 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 put its weights on the political balance for global challenges and chances. Yeah, for global matters. But this is only something what has been happening in the recent years. I have a vision of Indonesia that is formed by its own what we have domestically, historically, and what we need in the future, and how do we grow into that, not leaving the traditional and cultural values that we have behind. In fact, they fit partially very well to what we need to have in the future. I'm talking about the communalism, about the sense of caring for other people to the degree that to make sure that nobody is left out. That is, I think, very typically Indonesian, and that pertains to ASEAN actually very much so. I think that is something that I would say is very valid for most, if not all, ASEAN countries. At the same time, we cannot basically disclose ourselves from close ourselves from external impacts. External impacts are basically to be seen in the future system that we see in the world, like two superpowers and some countries aligning with those. And that's what I mean with the US and China. And there's something that our society will learn. And the future will be basically like a melange, like a mix of that. Okay, and one more thing, yeah. The ability to innovate is something that is crucial for all societies around the world because we never know what is the future challenge going to be. And also, when you talk in an economic context, we have now been living in an age of disruption. And disruption means that there's nothing you have already that can deal with what's there in front of you. So you have to innovate by the very nature of things. And I am a true believer that this pace of disruption is going to increase. It's not going to decrease. I want Indonesia to be productively participating in this. Yeah, so this innovation should not leave anybody out. Everybody needs to. Okay, not everybody is an innovator, but I think uh, people should gain should have a better life because of the innovation that has been created, basically. And I think the future of Indonesia, because Indonesia is so big, is also very much determined by the ability of us to innovate and basically find solutions for our challenges in the future.